Our first witness today. Our witness is from UNESCO. It's Ambassador Natasha Power-Kayer, who is also our permanent delegate at UNESCO. Ambassador Kayer, thank you for joining us. I know it's the middle of the night for you, and but you were very, very gracious to accommodate us, and we look very much forward to your remarks. So you will have 5 minutes to provide your remarks, after which the members will have an opportunity to ask you questions. The floor is yours, Madam Ambassador. Yeah, she just did.
The microphone's working? No. Okay. Je recommence.
I'll start again. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, members of the committee. I'm honoured to be here today as Canada's permanent delegate to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, UNESCO, to participate in this important study. Let me begin with a few words about Canada's work at UNESCO, generally speaking. Our primary role is to advocate for the inclusion of Canada's political priorities in UNESCO's priorities, such that they are reflected, including those related to human rights and normative activities. This is how we have consistently advocated on behalf of Ukraine in recent years. Following Russia's attempted annexation and illegal occupation of Crimea in 2014, Canada advocated for the organisation to monitor cultural heritage, the right to education and freedom of expression in Crimea, in order to hold Russia accountable for its actions. After February 24 of this year, we pushed for a decision by the Executive Council condemning Russia's actions and calling on UNESCO to act on behalf of Ukraine.
Let me offer a few specifics with regard to UNESCO's subsequent actions following that decision. With regard to freedom of expression and of the media, UNESCO rolled out an emergency response mechanism to protect journalists, media, and communications infrastructure, to bolster civilians' access to life-saving information and to tackle disinformation. The Canada-UK Global Media Defence Fund, which is based in UNESCO and was established in 2019, has supported the provision of emergency safety and communications equipment to journalists directly, has relocated 2 journalists' unions' offices to safe areas, and has provided conflict reporting safety training to journalists, many of whom were transformed overnight into war correspondents. In the area of education, UNESCO is working to maintain continuity for Ukrainian students, both inside and outside of Ukraine. With 23 private and public partners, UNESCO is supplying computer equipment, assisting in the creation of online learning content, and collaborating with UNHCR to develop digital learning recommendations for refugee-receiving countries. Canada is exploring how we can best further bolster our support for this effort. In the area of cultural property, In the area of cultural property, 3 UNESCO conventions are of direct relevance in the current context. The famed 1972 World Heritage Convention stipulates that states parties must not take part in any deliberate measures that would damage the cultural natural heritage situated on the territory of other states parties. Both Ukraine and Russia are signatories to this treaty, but only Russia is a member of the World Heritage Committee and in fact is currently chairing it. Canada has been actively working through our delegation here and directly amongst partners with our like-minded to address this untenable situation. But the convention offers very limited options in that regard, and it requires a 2/3 majority vote of sitting committee members to change the situation. Both Ukraine and Russia are also parties to the 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict, which requires parties to support cultural property in their own territory and that of other parties. Its first protocol prohibits the export of cultural property from occupied territories, a point relevant to the objects that Russia is alleged to have removed from Ukraine. UNESCO also recognizes that in times of armed conflict, measures to protect cultural heritage from trafficking need to be reinforced, and does so under the UNESCO 1970 Convention against illicit trafficking of cultural property. The organization is currently working in concert with other multilateral institutions to make it more difficult to loot and traffic Ukrainian objects, and additional funding is currently being sought to enable a quicker, more effective global response. We know that we need to protect Ukrainian cultural heritage and that the need is immense. And Canada's financial contribution of $4.8 million to UNESCO's Heritage Emergency Fund, which was made in March 22, gave a welcome boost to this effort. In doing so, we're enabling UNESCO and its partners such as Blue Shield International, Interpol, ICOMOS, ICROM, and the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe to help Ukrainian authorities through actions ranging from digitizing collections, providing protective packing materials, mobilizing experts to provide technical advice, and assisting in the relocation of movable cultural property. Importantly, UNESCO has also commissioned UNITAR to provide satellite monitoring and imagery to document and assess damage to heritage sites, museums, and cultural institutions, and has to date verified harm to 123 properties. The organization is also conducting a preliminary damage assessment regarding reports of objects being removed from museums in Melitopol and Mariupol by Russian authorities. En bref, les moyens d'action d'urgence.
In brief, the tools at UNESCO's disposal in terms of emergency relief on the ground are modest. However, UNESCO's reputation enables it to mobilize its partners and to act as a main interlocutor of the Ukrainian government in the areas within its purview. We hope that UNESCO will be able to do even more at the end of the war in terms of reconstruction. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. We will now turn to the members. Each member will have 5 minutes, and if they do go over 30 seconds before their time is up, I will be putting up the sign. The first member is Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank UNESCO representative for being here. If you can, I found your testimony really, really interesting. I'd like to know, is Russia currently a signatory to any of the conventions that UNESCO oversees, in particular around cultural property and heritage?
Yes, indeed. And the Russian Federation is a very active member in the cultural field at UNESCO. And as I mentioned, there are 3 main conventions that are pertinent in the context of the conflict itself, and that is the World Heritage Convention, because there are stipulations, commitments that are made by states parties within it not to conduct any activity which harms natural or built heritage. There's also the 1970 Convention on the illicit traffic in cultural property, which again, Russia is signatory to. And then very importantly, because it's also linked to the Geneva Conventions, is the 1954 Hague Convention on the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict. And that one is the one that is the most relevant, I think, in the current context. And it has clear stipulations that restrict what signatories can do. It has 2 protocols. Russia isn't signatory to the second protocol, which has some elements that are more of an give some more specificity to what those responsibilities are, but nevertheless, it is signatory to the convention itself and its first protocol, which covers all the bases essentially of controlling what they do.
Thank you. And you mentioned that Canada, that we have given 4.8 million to the UNESCO Heritage Cultural Fund, if I recall correctly. And what in addition to that, what can Canada do to help preserve the cultural heritage in this conflict that Ukraine is facing with Russia in this war?
I have to say, what we've done is nothing short of amazing, considering the fact that the cultural the Heritage Emergency Fund has, generally speaking, received contributions of a much smaller size. Our contribution has expanded the possibilities for them exponentially compared to what they had in hand at the start of the conflict. So we are doing a lot in having provided that 4.8 million. Canada, as a country and with a significant expertise in preservation, restoration, the maintenance of cultural collections, digitization, and so on, is providing additionally expertise through these international networks to which many of our citizens who have that expertise belong, and who are then being connected with Ukraine via the organization that is bringing those experts together, so that those connections can then produce results on the ground and help the Ukrainians more quickly protect those elements physically, the ones that need to be protected physically because they can't be moved, and to also deal with the movable collections and to either transfer them somewhere else or to prepare the timelines for that potential transfer if it can't be done at the moment, because there are certain areas, of course, where there is nowhere to go in the situation where they find themselves.
Thanks. And there's been a lot of conversation around genocide in Ukraine from Russia. And do you see a link between genocidal intent and the destruction of cultural and heritage properties and sites, I should say, vis-a-vis Russia towards Ukraine?
Well, genocide convention is really outside of my mandate, so I'd be skating on thin ice to comment on that. But I think, generally speaking, when assessments are made in a proceeding to determine whether or not genocide is in fact being perpetrated, there's always a question of intent, and that's something that I think in certain cases, perhaps, and this is a personal opinion here, if there is, clearly targeting of cultural property, that could be used as an element to try to establish that there is intent. But I mean, I again do not have responsibility for legal conventions in general. I'm a UNESCO ambassador. It's really something that's beyond the scope of my expertise. And so, but clearly there is a need to protect cultural heritage based in international humanitarian law, because it's been seen to be something that destroys the will and commits harm to those societies that have their heritage destroyed.
Turn to Mr.
I don't know
Cooper.
if that answers your question.
It helps enlighten it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ambassador. And picking up where you left off with regards to the clear targeting of cultural property, Is there evidence that Russia is deliberately targeting Ukrainian cultural and heritage sites?
Again, this becomes a question of determining intent. What is clear is that there are many properties now, and like I said, as of Monday morning, there was 123 sites that have been documented as having been damaged or destroyed by Russian forces. The question as to why those sites were hit is going to be something that will have to be determined through investigations. It's really hard for me. I mean, I haven't even seen the imagery, so I can't, can't comment on that precisely. And in any event, it will require formal investigations, in order to make determinations of that nature. In the fog of war, that's going to be difficult, but nevertheless, what is clear is you have a country that's invaded another one. I think there's enough material that is currently being documented to prove that there are war crimes happening of different types. We'll see how those are adjudicated. And again, this is not the area of my expertise, but there is now at least a significant effort to document what is going on, both through people on the ground and, as I mentioned earlier, through the use of satellite imagery and taking constant photographs of what are the principal sites. I have to say, just maybe to add, this 4.8 million that we had given to the Heritage Emergency Fund has enabled a significant increase in the amount of satellite coverage that is being put over Ukraine. It's enabled 6 additional cities to be given coverage, and that is very significant. They're very significant cultural centers. So it's, again, like I said, not a negligible contribution that Canada is making in this regard. It is of the level that one would expect, given our overall commitments to Ukraine and to helping them through this very, very difficult time.
Thank you for that. And in fact, according to the numbers that I see, it's 127 sites as of yesterday that have now been damaged. Would you be able to speak about UN Security Council Resolution 2347 in regards to the protection of cultural heritage as a security imperative?
I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to do that, because I haven't been dealing with the UN Security Council resolutions on this. Really, we deal with the programs that develop policies to help states protect their own heritage. And that's what these cultural conventions are really focused on.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry.
And the resolution, just for the record, provides that the deliberate destruction of cultural property constitutes a war crime.
Yes, well, so that exists in other.
Certainly, it does, and you didn't touch on
legal.
that specific resolution, which had been unanimously adopted by the Security Council in 2017, which I think is clearly applicable.
I don't disagree with you, but at UNESCO we don't, generally speaking, deal with the UN Security Council resolutions.
I understand that.
We just have to make sure that
that's
we can
fine.
contravene them.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. We now go to Mr. Trudell.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. And thank you, Ambassador, for being here today. I really appreciate the fact that you speak French. I confess that often we talk about protecting both official languages in Canada, that French is threatened, and it's comforting to know that our representative at UNESCO speaks French fluently. And I was touched to hear you speak French earlier, and I'm very grateful, and thank you very much. I have a kind of a general question to begin with. Ukraine is a country at war currently, and last week there was a representative from the International Criminal Court. We spoke about war crimes. There were Ukrainian witnesses, violations of human rights. We don't have the figures yet on how many casualties there have been to date in this conflict, but the news is focusing on protecting civilians in Mariupol and other areas. So in other conflicts, not in Ukraine, but in other conflicts, how does UNESCO deal with countries at war when it comes to religious and cultural heritage? Obviously, it's important to protect it, whatever the conflict is. So how has UNESCO gone about protecting heritage in the context of other conflicts?
Merci.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to hear you speaking French and to respond in French. It's a wonderful question that you've asked. And let me just give you a brief description and an example that I had experienced myself with my own eyes. At UNESCO, we have lists that are drawn up. There is a World Heritage list that folks are very much aware of. These are worldwide extraordinary sites that are handpicked and identified as having a universal cultural value. And all the coordinates of these sites, as well as the tentative lists, the provisional lists for sites that might be added in the near future, well, they're all collated and broken down in terms of their geographical location, and they are in the hands of UNESCO, those lists. Now, with the Hague Convention of 1954 to protect cultural objects in a time of war, there is a mechanism whereby countries can identify the sites to be protected were there ever to be a conflict on their territory. That is also coordinated and stockpiled. Those lists are held in a repository at UNESCO. Now, let me give you an example of the ramifications that this has had and how UNESCO's actions took immediate effect. There was an air campaign in Libya led by NATO and its allies. There was a call for those countries participating in the campaign to protect cultural sites located in Libya. Now, the commander of that campaign was a very accessible person. So we asked UNESCO to provide the coordinates of all the cultural sites. We provided them directly to the command, and the commander was under strict orders to not bomb those cultural sites. Now, it's not the case in all countries at war where the parties in the war are even interested in following international law. But in other conflicts, they do and are. So UNESCO is in a position to provide those coordinates if the parties to the war see fit to protect those cultural sites and therefore uphold their obligations in terms of international law, i.e. to not touch those objects. So that's direct action that UNESCO can take. What are the other steps that can be taken? Direct assistance can be offered. Technical advice, how to take a collection from a museum, prepare it, mobilize it, transfer it. This isn't something that one does on an everyday basis and that all museum directors are used to doing. They don't even have plans in place in many cases. Often museums have emergency plans for earthquakes or fires, but not in the case of a war or a conflict that forces them to relocate their collections to far-flung places and in remote locations. So there is technical advice that UNESCO is able to proffer, and UNESCO has translated into Ukrainian a guidebook such that these museum directors can, in short order, prepare, protect, and transport collections of different types. Some are archives, some are cultural objects, works of art that one would be familiar with in traditional and conventional museums. But this guidebook shows them how to do this within a short time frame so that there are no losses, and to ensure that there is a log of all of the items drawn up, and so that they can take all the preparations necessary. Moreover, UNESCO provides protective. As I was saying, we document collections that cannot be relocated, and there are special techniques that are used that UNESCO can give advice on. UNESCO can even find experts who can provide advice even in war-torn zones, so that all of photographs are taken of these items. So were there to be those items to be destroyed and not recovered and transported, at the very least we have photos of them so that they can be reconstructed at a later date. So there's a lot that UNESCO can do. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Now go to Ms. McPherson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's nice to see you back. And I'd also like to thank our witness today. This has been very, very interesting. What I'm interested in learning a little bit more is that those ties to the need to erase a people when we are looking at the perpetration of genocide, and how the erasure of cultural heritage is part of that. So I recognize that right now in Ukraine it is extremely chaotic. There is a war going on, an illegal war, an illegal invasion, and people are dying. And of course, that must be our first priority and our first focus. But the work you're doing to ensure that the cultural identity of Ukraine is kept as safe as can be is so vitally important. So there's a couple questions I have for you. First of all, we've heard Vladimir Putin speak about how Ukraine are not even a people, that in fact Ukraine are Russians. I think obviously that's indicative of his genocidal intentions. But can you talk a little bit about how that position influences the destruction of cultural and heritage sites by the Russian army? And can you maybe also explain the link between genocidal intent and the destruction of cultural and heritage sites, please?
Well, again, I'm not a legal expert of the department, and I can't really comment on the determination of genocide with regard to this specific case. I mean, that's going to have to be adjudicated, and there are people that will then go through all of those elements that you've identified to try to piece together if there's a case or not to prove intent. Clearly, there is, in the current situation, absolutely no indication that there is any restraint that is being put on Russian armed forces in terms of what the messaging they're receiving from their leadership. I think if you're messaging that, that this people is only a people that have Nazi intent against Russia and against Russophones, then you're going to be enabling bad behavior by your own armed forces. You're not going to be feeling as a soldier, I'm sure, that you're going to be sanctioned for doing something when the country that you're in is being vilified by your own leadership. And those who are perpetrating these actions are not being called to account by their senior officers. So, I mean, that's just, an observation as somebody's watching this from the outside. What that will look like in a situation, should there ever be finally a real investigation and prosecution of the war crimes that are being perpetrated. It'll be for the courts to determine based on what the investigations are able to put together, and the prosecutor will be able to argue. It's from my perspective, of course, as somebody who's worked on the relationship between Russia and Ukraine and the West for over 2 decades now. I have to say the intent to be, is pretty clear. But that's just Natasha Kai. It has nothing to do with anything else, and it has no value. It's just a feeling, and I'm sure that's a feeling that's widely shared across Canada and across the Western world, who's been watching these atrocities going on. So, with regard to cultural property, I think there is clearly a disregard for anything that is Ukrainian cultural property, and there's not seemingly much intent to try to circumscribe what activities and what targeting is going on within Ukraine. I mean, we've seen some significant sites that have been completely destroyed, and including ones that were harboring people. Yeah. So I think that speaks for itself. But what the determination will be eventually is going to be in the hands of the experts that do the investigation and the prosecutors that'll bring it forward.
And I think probably, I mean, you mentioned some of this when you spoke to my colleague from the block, but the idea that using the destruction of cultural artifacts is a tool, whether it is in this case, whether that determination has been made by legal experts in this case is, of course, not been determined. But in previous examples of genocide, the destruction of cultural identity has been a piece of that. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not an expert on genocide, so, but sorry, I mean, I think we look at the Holocaust.
When we look at examples of the past, when it's been very clearly proven that genocide has taken place, the destruction of heritage and culture are often accompany that. Would that be accurate to say?
I would say, based on my reading as an amateur historian of military history and the Second World War in particular, which was catastrophic on that score.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I think that's all the time that I have.
It is. Thank you, Ms. McPherson, and once again, Madam Ambassador, allow me to thank you for joining us late into the night, your time. We're very, very grateful, and your comments and your responses were incredibly helpful. So thank you. And I know I speak on behalf of all members of the committee. Now, members, we will be going into the second session. How much time should we? So we're going to have to suspend and then resume. Welcome members of our second panel, who again, I should add, are joining us at a very late time in the evening, local time in Ukraine. By my calculations, it's around 2:30 in the morning, your time. So we're very, very grateful that you made yourselves available and you accepted our invitation. Now, we have today with us Ms. Yevhenia Kravchuk, Member of Parliament and Deputy Chair of the Servant of the People fraction. We also have Mr. Vladislav Atoroshenko, who is the Mayor of the city of Chernihiv. And the third person we currently have is Ms. Sevgil Musayeva, who is Editor-in-Chief of the Ukrainska Pravda. So allow me to explain to you that you each have 5 minutes for your opening statement. And of course, we're being provided simultaneous translation. After your opening statements are over, we will open it up to the floor and the members will have an opportunity to ask you questions. So Ms. Kravchuk, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very honored to be able to speak at this hearing, and I was honored to be part of a women delegation coming to Canada just 5 weeks ago, and I met at least some of you, as I recognize. First of all, I would like to thank for your help and for help of Canadian people. It's very important for us. It's very important that Prime Minister Trudeau just visited Ukraine a few days ago. And also I'd like to thank Chair of the Subcommittee, Ali Eksasi, for coming to Ukraine actually a few days ago as well, and having an opportunity witnessing the results of atrocities by Russian army in Ukraine and visiting actually Kyiv region and the small villages near Kyiv that were occupied for more than a month. And also, I would like to thank all of the members of Congress for voting for the resolution. I see Heather here both houses, Senate and House of Commons, for supporting resolution about genocide in Ukraine, because we really do think and we do feel that it is genocide. But we have not won yet. You know, the war is going. It's been 75 days right now of ongoing war and ongoing atrocities in Ukraine and gross violations of human rights every day. But it's only full-scale invasion for 75 days. The war had been ongoing for 8 years, and it started in 2014 with annexation of Crimea and the occupation of part of Donetsk and Luhansk region. And we have to understand that if world was strong enough to answer to Putin in 2014, probably we would not have these atrocities right now if he would be stopped in 2014. Russian army and its political leadership, Kremlin and Putin himself are responsible for numerous war crimes, thousands of war crimes in Ukraine. They crossed every red line since this full-scale invasion, shelling and bombing civilians, torturing civilians, executing them, raping women, children, establishing filtration camps, deportation, kidnappings, especially activists, journalists, and representatives of local governance and local councils. And I can just give you a few facts, and I'll be ready, of course, to answer your questions. We can't even say the estimated number of civilians that were killed since 24th of February, but only in Kyiv region, police discovered over 1,200 bodies. And these people were tortured, were shot to death. The bodies were found with hands tied. There were witnesses of women raped in front of children and children raped in front of their mothers. Some schools were turned into camps, into torturing camps. I have witness from Katyuzhanka, the principal of one of the schools, and he said that in their basement there was a torture camp where at least a couple of thousands of people were tortured, and some of them were killed. About Mariupol, you probably heard the name of the city. We can't really say how many people died in Mariupol. At least 20,000. Probably. We can't count them because we don't have an accent to this city right now. There have been mobile crematoriums working there to cover the bodies and to cover the traces of these war crimes committed. Also, the mass graves near Mariupol, we can see them from above. And also right now in Azovstal steel plant, still the defenders of Mariupol stay, and over 500 wounded soldiers still there. And Russians will not let them go, despite all rules of Geneva Convention. We're working together with United Nations, with Red Cross, with third-party countries to let them go, and we really hope for your support as well and political leadership in this process to let these people go. I can also send additional file both in English and French about shellings of civilians, the biggest cases. You probably heard about Kramatorsk railway station. 59 people died at one spot. Over 100 wounded. Also, the maternity ward in Mariupol, bombed in March. At least one mother-to-be died together with her unborn child. And many others cases. You will read this in the paper, but this case, it's someone's lost life and family losing children, or children losing parents. Also, another thing I would like
30
to
30 seconds.
Okay, probably I will leave that to answering the question. And to summarize, we really need to understand that this evil cannot go unpunished. These war crimes have to be punished, and we need to establish international war tribunal. So all these soldiers that committed crimes, but also the political leadership, would be in this court and punished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kravchuk. We now turn to Mayor Atroshenko. You have 5 minutes, sir. I'm so far.
Can you hear me now? Greetings to the esteemed members of Parliament. And I would also like to thank you on behalf of all of the residents of Chernihiv, on behalf of myself. I would like to thank the Government of Canada, the Prime Minister, the people of Canada for this powerful support you're lending us. We can really feel it We're very grateful for this. We're grateful to those Canadians who were one of the first who came to our aid. And we're also grateful to the members of the World Congress of Ukrainians. It's based in Canada. As regards war crimes that Russia committed in Chernihiv, here's what I have to say. From the very first days of the war, and you all know that the active phase of the war started in 2014, and then in 2022 it started on the 24th. And on the 27th of February, the first Iskander missiles hit the building of our city council in the very center of Chernihiv, next to the central square. These are very powerful missiles, and they were obviously directed by the Russian officers to the downtown of this city that's 1,300 years old. Clearly, they were aiming for the city council, but I think they were also aiming for civilian population. The city was surrounded for a month and a half. The city was shelled with all kinds of weapons. The shelling was indiscriminate. It was chaotic. Various calibers of weapons, artillery, tanks, missiles were used. Aviation bombing was deployed. 314 civilians died, 16 of them children. Children under 16 years of age. Russians were consciously committing these crimes. They knew they were not shooting at any military units or infrastructure. They were shooting at the infrastructure of the city, civilian infrastructure. In particular, the water pumping stations, the electricity stations, the auto parks belonging to the city, public transit parks. 9,652 apartments have been destroyed completely, and 1,500 private houses have been destroyed as well. This shows that the entire city was under fire. Putin himself called this city the cradle of orthodoxy. It was in the city of Chernihiv that the Kievan Rus actually started. So it's not just the city they were destroying. It was the entire historical city that contains many cultural sites. This is a city of ancient history. Luckily, the Russians were unable to enter the administrative territory of the city. Thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine and thanks to the thousands of the residents of the region who took up arms and who repeated the feats of their ancestors who have never given up and have never surrendered in the history. There are egregious cases of war crimes that I could cite. There is a pilot by the name of Krasnoyartsev who was killed, but he also testified. He dropped 6 bombs of 500 kilograms each, TNT, in the epicenter of these explosions, about 10 kilometers from there. There are no military infrastructure sites. And 49 9 civilians died during these bombing attacks. They were just there in their own apartments. They had no weapons in their arms. These were mostly women and children. And these were elderly people. They died without ever trying to resist the Russian army. There's another egregious case. A mortar shelling was done on a lineup of people who were trying to buy bread, and several people died in that attack. I also know cases when mortar shelling led to dismembering one IT programmer who was going to work, lost his limbs, and many other people who are innocent people have lost their lives.
Your remarks. You obviously will have the opportunity to answer questions by the members.
Yes, I would like to conclude my remarks by saying the following. I'd like to support what Yevgenia said before me. These atrocities, these crimes of the Russian army have been committed consciously. The Russian army is called a terrorist organization by all the residents of the region. Russia is the aggressor, and Russia has to be held accountable in the International Tribunal, and Putin has to be brought to accounts personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Ms. Musayeva. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, all. My name is Savil Musayeva. I'm chief editor of Ukrainska Pravda. So I'm not a politician, I'm not a human rights defender, but I face with human rights violation and violation of humanitarian international law every day. And I want to thank you for your continuous support of our country during these very hard times. So, as a journalist, I also recognize this war, not only the war between democratic values and between authoritarian regime, but also war between truth and propaganda. And I also see how all during last 8 years, Russian propaganda fueled this war. And I also see how journalists during this war became a real target. What I mean that more than 20 journalists already were killed by Russian army in Ukraine. Of course, not all of them were during covering of this war, but during covering of this war, already 11, which is tremendous, this is crazy. Among them was my good friend, Brent Renaud. He's an American filmmaker. He came to Ukraine to show story of refugee or Ukrainian refugees, and he came to European together with another my friend, Colombian journalist Juan Redonda, and he was injured actually, and he already went through 5 operations, and it's difficult. But here I want to go that we are, as a journalist, we became a human rights defender because we all during all this time we faced with a lot of human rights violations. What I mean, for example, 3 weeks ago, one of my colleagues asked to tell a story about her mother. Her mother was in Rubezhna city in Donetsk region. Together with her 2 small kids, she was forcibly deported to Leningrad Oblast in Russia. For 3 days, they were traveling in train, and of course, we helped them. Now they're in Estonia. But as a Crimean Tatar, whose family were deported in 1944 by Soviet army, I was shocked that it is possible in 21st century. During all these 75 days of war, we covered a lot of stories about filtration camps in occupied territories. And unfortunately, a lot of our people, I mean Ukrainians, went through these filtration camps. And unfortunately, some of them were captured by Russians and still in these filtration camps. And I also want to continue that more than 100,000 people still in Mariupol, which is now occupied by Russia, and they they can travel and they can be evacuated during this story. What I was shocked by for the last 3 days. Militaries from Azovstal, my colleague Evgenia already described this brutal situation, asked me that one of their physicians was traveling together with her kid by official evacuation of International Red Cross. And unfortunately, they were separated with her daughter, 4 months old, and her mother now in filtration camp in Mangush. She was a physician in Azovstal, and she is in filtration camp, and her daughter was traveling alone to Zaporizhia because Russians captured her mother, and we still don't have an idea where she is. Like maybe in this filtration camp in Mangush. We asked all humanitarian organizations to help us, and this is not like a similar situation. We face with such brutal human rights violation every single day. So my remarks about this situation, first of all, help us to evacuate people, help us to provide international humanitarian corridors for people from Azovstal now, because we know that there are a lot of civilians still in this place. We know that there are a lot of injured soldiers, like around 600 injured soldiers, and today they showed us like brutal pictures of that. And a lot of physicians who help these people last 75 days, but already they don't have a medicine, they don't have a water, they don't have medical tools to provide their assistance. And second, of course, I'm asking about support, your support to help Ukraine with investigation of these humanitarian of these war crimes. Of course, we need absolutely separate international humanitarian law court for Ukrainian situation. Of course, I know that it will be difficult. I know all problems of this, but last time I interviewed a very famous professor, Philip Sands, who wrote a book about two brave Ukrainians who created like international law basis and even genocide. They provided genocide, and he described that it was difficult during their time, but they did it. So I hope that in the 21st century, when our world faced with such brutality of humanitarian law violations, we need a new
Ms. Musayeva, if I could ask that you conclude.
Yeah. I finished.
Thank you for that. Now, our fourth witness has now joined us. We have Mr. Yuri Bova, who is the mayor of the city of Trotsyanets. The floor is yours, Mr. Bova. You have 5 minutes, please.
Good day to everyone. I represent a small Ukrainian city, Trotsyanets. We are located 30 kilometers from the Russian Federation. And so from the very first day, we became very much aware of all war activities. This Russian army actually entered the city with hundreds of armored cars and thousands of Russian troops who occupied the city. It was a peaceful city because there was no Ukrainian military stationed there. So we were occupied, and from the very first days, they started to commit acts of atrocities towards civil population. And on the third day of the war, there was a woman who walked on the street to go buy some groceries. She was an elderly lady. She was 75 years old, and she was killed by a Russian sniper. And then this sniper wouldn't let anyone to approach the body of this woman for 3 days. No relatives could even collect the body. They wouldn't allow anyone to approach. So she was just laying there on the street. So we all felt terrorized. And there were many instances for example, in another case, in a private dwelling house, it was bombed, and the person who lived there was torn to pieces. Another thing, the Russians would prevent people from burying dead. Also, we found people who were terrorized, who were interrogated. We saw the heavy beatings, and their hands were tied. So, untold atrocities. And in one case, a woman had to piece together body of her husband, but then she was prevented from burying her husband, and children had to see the body of their father who was in the house, and they were not able to bury him. Can you imagine that, living in the house where it's untold horrible situations, and there are a number of such horrible situations that happened during the occupation of the city. At the cemetery, Russians, they placed their tanks, and they would not allow for any burial to take place. We tried to organize so-called green corridors to evacuate people from the city, but under the pretense of actually these so-called green corridors, Russians were bringing more troops and more armament into the city. They would search people, they would stop, they would ask to. We were cut out from the rest of the world because of there was interruptions with the communications. We kept seeing huge amounts of military personnel, Russian personnel, and military equipment, and we never knew what was going to happen next, what other kinds of sufferings they were going to execute on us. The Russians, in fact, they occupied us for 31 days, and during this 31 days period, they prevented from any food supplies to enter the city, to be brought to the city. At the same time, they robbed all the pharmacies, all the stores. They destroyed all ambulances, so the city was left without a single working ambulance. Madame Olena Penkina, they had to walk for miles to get to a local local medical clinic, and on the way there, she's actually I know this for a fact because she worked at the city council, and she was killed by the fire from a Russian military vehicle. We had a number of older population who were again prevented from leaving the city. Russians would not allow to anyone to leave the city. we had interruptions of electricity, water supplies. People had to go without food supplies, without functioning water. At early days, because it was still February, there was snow, so people were melting snow and drinking water from melted snow. They were marauders. We found some notes from afterwards. We don't know who that person was, who Russian person. On the 3rd of March, we arrived to the city of Trostyanets, but we are actually behaving like fascists. We've robbed all the stores, we've broken all the windows, and we've done much damage. And then he continues, this Russian soldier. But at the same time, he says, I went to a store, I found a nice lady's bag for my wife. And some other accessories, and he says, and I didn't take anything else because I didn't like anything else what I saw there. So these people, the Russians, they realize what they are doing. It's not like they don't understand what they are doing, but nevertheless they continue these activities. Our security sources.
1 minute.
We found a note, again, a notebook from one of the soldiers, which describes the interrogations and atrocities that more than 20 people were in that torture chamber suffered through. Also on March 23, our local hospital was bombed. It was by tank fire from about distance of 200 meters. It was 32 32 shots.
The members have questions they wanted to ask all the panelists. You have 10 seconds just to conclude it.
This is an example of atrocities. The entire world should make sure that Putin is brought to account. We believe in Ukraine and the armed forces of Ukraine, and we believe in our victory. Ukraine will be victorious. Thank you.
Now we will go to the members for questions. I should say that for each segment and for each member, there's only 5 minutes. So once the 5 minutes are up, I'm going to have to indicate that and cut you off. So the first member for this round is Ms. Vandenbeld. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And before I begin, I think I speak for all of us and all parliamentarians in saying that we absolutely stand solidly with you. We applaud your courage, and we stand beside you in our outrage at the crimes that you are testifying about today. It is good to see you again, Ms. Kravchuk. I hope that the next time will be under much better circumstances. And also, just Ms. Musaiva, the fact that as a journalist, you have of necessity become a human rights defender. I think we applaud everything that you're doing. I do want to direct my questions today to the two mayors, to Mayor Atrashenko and Mayor Bova. Just the courage of you testifying today from your cities and telling us what has actually happened. I've heard from all of you talking about impunity, talking about crimes not going unpunished, that there has to be accountability. And often when we're dealing with these things, it's after the fact, when much of the evidence has been destroyed, when it's very hard to go back in time and collect the kind of evidence that can hold up in court. But this is happening now. This is happening in real time. So can you tell us what Canada can do. One of the things we're doing is we've sent members of our National Police Force, the RCMP, to the International Criminal Court to do investigation. But is there more that we can do to support those on the ground who are experiencing and seeing this and witnessing it firsthand to understand what they need to do in order to be able to document this, maybe helping the Ukrainian prosecutor's office or civil society members. I will start with you, Mr. Atroshenko. Go ahead.
I think that Canada and all our major partners who are the most staunch in their support, the UK, Poland, the US, the Baltic states. So for us, what's most important is all these NATO member states, all these EU member states, we urge them to maintain economic sanctions. We think that it's the economic sanctions on the one hand and our military resistance within Ukraine. These are the most important things that can be done right now. That's why we do understand that if you join in the sanctions, then your countries, of course, are suffering certain losses, some more, some less. However, today we clearly understand that Putin is related to Hitler in his ideology, and propagating fascism cannot be justified. So I think the consistent pressure of the sanctions and speaking to European countries, urging them, such countries as Hungary, for example, urging them to join in the sanctions. Hungary is a NATO member, but it should be urged to be more active. And Germany and France, by the way. These are the biggest things.
Thank you.
We need weapons, the high-tech weapons. This is what will help us triumph over Putin. Thank you.
No, there's not much time left, so I'd like to just have Mr. Bova weigh in as well. Go ahead.
You know, you're entirely right. We do need to collect this evidence as soon as possible. We need to prepare the documents of those witnesses, and it has to be done by people who have the relevant experience. You know, our generation did not know war. So all these investigators who are investigating, they do need your assistance. So please come to our cities. We haven't been able to rebuild everything. You can see the ruins with your own eyes. We actually preserved the very tank that destroyed our hospital. Our Ukrainian armed forces actually damaged it. And inside the tank, there are the documents of all the tank crew who were committing these crimes. There are people who were tortured, and maybe there are psychologists who can work with them. There are people who are prepared to work with others to tell the atrocities they lived through. But it's very hard to talk about these things, about the atrocities that were committed against their persons, against their bodies. This has to be recorded and then shown to the world. You have to show how Russia behaved. They behaved like a Nazi Germany. And international journalists should come and show the truth about Russia. The entire world first did not believe that Russia would attack Ukraine. They did not believe that Putin's policies were criminal. And today, as you go to Chernihiv, to Trostenets, to Bucha, to Irpin, to other cities, you and the Europeans can witness what this policy has done to Ukraine. And it's not just Putin's policy, it's the entire Russian policy. These Russian soldiers, he was decrying fascism, but yet he was behaving like a fascist. He was looting. These people live differently, they have a different mentality, and the entire world has to see and do something about it. Russian troops are being neutralized by the Ukrainian army, and we are grateful for all the help you're providing in that regard. But we have to think more long-term. Even if they do leave Ukraine, but the aggression could come back. Today they're bombing Ukrainian cities where there are no Russian troops. We have air raid sirens every day. Sumy region was bombed today. How much can this go on for? We need economic sanctions. We need international influence. I would urge Canadian cities and towns to rupture their ties with the Russian cities and towns. You cannot be friends with aggressors. Let us forge these ties with Ukrainian cities and let's help Ukrainian cities rebuild.
Thank you. My apologies for that. Now we have to go to Mr. Cooper. You have 7 minutes, Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Viersen, actually.
Yes, my apologies. It's Mr. Viersen.
Thank you, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here as well. Ms. Kravchuk, I was just going to start with you there. We know that the Russian military seems to be violating the laws of engagement during the war. I think the comment has been made that even war has rules. We have folks from around the world that are coming to the aid of Ukraine. We have the Ukrainian army. We have Ukrainian civilians being armed. What is the Ukrainian government doing to educate those that are fighting for Ukraine on international humanitarian law and the rules of engagement, and how to identify some of these crimes that have been committed and how to report those? Because they are the people that are on the ground. They're eyewitnesses to this. Is anything being done to ensure that they are capable of identifying war crimes, capable of reporting these war crimes? Is there anything being done in that regard?
Yes, thank you for the question. From the very beginning in February, we had a big network of NGOs that volunteered to be helping to collect the war crimes. And these NGOs are working in the field of human rights defendants. And also, I would like, as a former journalist, I would like to thank all the journalists that are working on the ground, because they are doing a great job right now. They're going to hotspots, both international journalists from different areas. I mean, Yuri Boy just said that they have, tens of. I mean, give his phone number to a lot of journalists. He probably doesn't know, but I give, and they are collecting evidence. I mean, when I had a speech in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, I was giving testimony of this principle I mentioned to you from Katyuzhanka, from Kyiv region, and these testimonies were sent to me by a journalist who is writing in English, in German, and I think in some of the Scandinavian languages. So he just sent me these testimonies with evidence, was who said that, and I delivered it to international audience. Of course, probably we're not that educated, didn't have too many trainings on how to report these war crimes, but we do put this into paper and saving this to give to international tribunal, because that's everyone, you see that every witness is saying that, and that's going from the heart of every person in Ukraine, that this evil has to be punished. And if I have just 30 seconds to maybe jump into the previous question about what can be done by Canada and how can be helped, and it's together with putting this into paper. It's also help in trauma counselor and help to women who experienced sexual violence, because the numbers of sexual violence is very underreported, because women are afraid, they're afraid to be stigmatized, they do not want to talk. And I'm also an author of a resolution in PACE and Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe about women in conflicts, and I found out that in for example Balkan conflict, some of the women started to talk 15 years later. So it's a long process, and we would need this support in trauma counseling, especially because the women are not only in Ukraine, they also fled the country into other regions, and they need to get this support in any corner of the world they are. Thank you.
Yeah, that's precisely where I was going to go kind of next with my questioning. We know that like millions of people have been fleeing, mostly women and children. Ukraine has been a target country for human traffickers before the war, and that's only gotten worse. Is the Ukrainian government spending any time on trying to educate folks that are fleeing the country? Hey, watch out for the human traffickers, and are you working with the European countries to which, or the European Union on how to combat human trafficking that is occurring?
It's kind of really difficult to educate people who are fleeing the country with 2 or 3 kids on their hands. Because it's sort of, very hectic time when they are fleeing. But we do work with European Union and commissioners and, European bureaucrats who is dealing with this. And myself, I went to few trips I had meetings in European Parliament, and our counterparts in European Parliament are aware of this problem. And they're working together with their volunteers and making, trying to alert about this situation. And of course, women, especially with kids, are vulnerable groups for human trafficking. But we do work with our colleagues in European countries to make sure that there would be less targets to that. But just to conclude with that, we've been talking about all these atrocities that are happening and people fleeing. We need to go to what has caused that. The only way to stop these atrocities, to stop gross human violations, to stop people fleeing the country and being target of human trafficking is winning in this war and stopping Putin. There's no other ways to stop that and to finish all the atrocities. Because right now, somewhere in Kherson region, Russians are torturing Ukrainians, or in Mariupol, or in other countries that are other villages that are under control of Russian troops in very same moment. So the sooner we get the heavy weapons, the sooner we kick them out of our country, liberate our land, we will end the atrocities and end human rights violations.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Trudell.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to all four of the witnesses. It's been very touching, very moving this evening, all the testimony that we've heard. The two mayors spoke about what has been occurring in your respective towns and cities. Very touching, very moving. My question is for Ms. Musaeva. Now, from here in Canada, it's our sense that it is the first real war on the internet. There's a lot of photos on Facebook, on Twitter, of the atrocities occurring across Ukraine. Now, as a journalist, and I think of what happened in Bucha at some point, we saw the first photos, dead bodies in the streets, and there was information that came through later that it was all, in fact, photoshopped. So how does one verify what is true and what is fake? How does one determine that what is disinformation, what's fake news and what isn't when you're a journalist? How do you parse all that apart?
Thank you for your question. Yes, it's important. And we already face, as a journalist, we already live in circumstances of information war and hybrid war for the last 8 years. So we started in Crimea. It started from annexation of Crimea. And I faced with this personally because my family lived in Crimea during these times. And I do remember how Russian propaganda just lied about everything what was going on in Ukraine and in Crimea. So for the last after these last 8 years, journalists in Ukraine have a good experience how to fight with propaganda and how to protect themselves in kind of these violations of informational field as well. So what is my response? Of course, we know this. I think that one of my favorite example how it was during this time. Two photographers in Mariupol, Evgeny Maloletko and Mstislav Chernov, and they filmed a lot of human rights violations in Mariupol. They, for example, filmed and they took photos from this hospital in Mariupol, which was bombed by Russians. And I do remember how first Russian embassy in Britain said that it was fake news. But they provided all evidences that it wasn't that they made this photo. So how we work during these times, of course, we have reporters in different cities. We have reporters. I visited, for example, Trostenets last month, and I met with Yuri Bova, and I saw these techniques on my own eyes. Of course, we have a lot of open sources tools, how we control this information, how we control all these photos which we received. Of course, we faced sometimes, first of all, at the beginning of war, actually, with some fake photos from kind of territory that were occupied by Russia during these times, but it's easy. So we have a lot of tools, open tools that helped us to know that it's not a Photoshop. So that's a lot of our journalists work from these places also give us truth and give us understanding of this situation. But maybe.
Well, thank you. My next question is for Ms. Kravchuk. We get the sense that the conflict is in a lull at the moment. There was an offensive, and then for a month and a half, we get the sense that the Russians aren't moving forward. That's perhaps an incorrect impression we're getting, but we get the sense that the Ukrainians are getting back some of the ground that they lost. And there are figures that would suggest that 1.1 million Ukrainians who are in Poland, they already want to go back to Ukraine, and the mayors have referred to reconstruction that started in some parts of Ukraine. So what's the state of mind, the mentality among Ukrainians right now? We've heard about the sense of resilience that a lot of Ukrainians are feeling, but it's difficult from our point of view to know whether the war will be finished in a month or in 3 years. I don't know if any of you have an answer to that tough question, but how does the Ukrainian people feel really about what is occurring at this point in time?
When I was returning from my trip to Strasbourg, I was taking a bus from Poland, just a regular bus. There was no spare space in this bus. Everyone was returning home. So yes, that's why we ask not to call Ukrainians refugees, because they are not giving up their homeland. They want to return. They're just seeking a temporary asylum in the countries where they are. They want to go home to their cities. But for example, I met in Poland. I went to a place where our externally displaced people are, and I met actually a family from Chernihiv, and their house was ruined. So they can't really come back right now, but I'm sure, that we will rebuild Chernihiv, but it will take, of course, some time. Those cities that were not under bombing, under heavy bombing, people, of course, they are coming back right now. But for example, it's impossible to come back to Donetsk region or to Luhansk region. For example, in Luhansk region, 1 million people that stayed both in occupied territories since 2014 and free territory or freshly occupied. 1 million people do not have access to water because it was ruined. The infrastructure for water supply was completely ruined. You can't really live there. Right now, our troops are regaining parts of Kharkiv region, village by village, like every day, and people can't really come back the very next day, because we just had yesterday 2 women in a village that was liberated like 3 days ago. They went into the mine and they just died because of the mine. Actually, it's another thing that Canada can help us, because we know that you're very good in demining process, and that's very much needed, because we have right now Ukraine is the most polluted in mines and not blown up artillery country in the world. So we would need really help with that. So, but on the other hand, we understand that we need our economy to be running, because of course, we're getting this financial aid, but we understand that our country needs to sort of rebuild into the economy of the wartime. But businesses where they can work, they should work, and people where can live, they should live. Thank you.
I didn't hear you, Mr. Chair, but I assume that was an acknowledgement of me.
Yes, correct.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to echo my colleagues and thank everyone so much for being here today, for sharing this testimony. It's, as you can imagine, very, very difficult to hear, but very important that we hear it. Ms. Kravchuk, I just want to tell you that when you were in Canada and you met with me and met with my colleagues, it was the impetus that moved me to bring forward the motion on genocide. So your advocacy on behalf of Ukraine is so vitally important. So thank you for being here again. I have to say, I have a young woman who started working in my office, a Ukraine intern, who brought me a flag of Ukraine that's been signed by soldiers in Ukraine. We both started to cry when she gave that to me, because I want all of you to know that you are not alone. Like we are seeing what is happening in Ukraine. We are standing with you. We will be there in the short term, the medium, and the long term. And I think that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit today is when Ukraine wins, because we all know that this is the only option. That what has to happen is that Putin has to be held to account so he doesn't continue to feel that in another several years he can invade again. We can't have this continue on. It has to be very, very set. So we will be there to help make sure that the international criminal courts are activated, that those crimes are being prosecuted, and that justice is being brought. But what I'd like some feedback from the mayors, if I could have, is from your perspective, you on the ground that are seeing the massive impacts of the infrastructure of water and electricity, what are those things that you need from Canada and from the global community to rebuild in terms of the short term? So I heard the call for support in demining. Obviously we need to make sure that people have access to clean drinking water, medicine supports through the medical supports. Those the short term, and then also the long term, because I think we're going to need something like a Marshall Plan to rebuild Ukraine. Perhaps, Mayor, Your Worship, Atroshenko, if I could start with you, please.
First of all, I think we need to until we achieve our victory. To me, as a city mayor, I am communicating and I'm with different funds, with different organizations from European countries, not only Europeans. There was a representative also from Japan, from a big development fund, and I know that there are all kinds of contacts, negotiations happening, but everyone is waiting until the war has ended. Because I can talk about my city, about city of Chernihiv, and we made some preliminary calculations, and they show that we have suffered direct losses approximately €1.5 billion. I mean here destruction of property, of houses and infrastructure, as well as roads, buildings, surfaces, buildings, warehouses, schools. We have some of the schools destroyed completely. So there will be a need for a lot of resources to rebuild it. We will need new technologies. And obviously, we won't be able to do it on our own from our city revenues. So we would look to the outside revenues, outside resources to help us in our rebuild effort. But it probably can take place only after the active phase of this military campaign has concluded.
Ви знаєте,
I think I am a little bit different from my colleague. I think we don't need to wait till the end of the war, but we should start activities. I can see on many of your lapels some Ukrainian pins with Ukrainian symbols. It shows your support. I know that you believe in Ukraine, believe in Ukrainian people. You stand with us, and currently our military is prosecuting defense of our country to the best of their abilities. Russia is suffering heavy military losses in Ukraine, and we are hoping that this would prevent any future attacks in the future. All of our people as one, we help our Ukrainian military personnel, we support them, and as my previous colleague said, we all want our people to come back to our cities, they rebuild their lives, renew their lives, continue. Our city is 30 kilometers from the Russian border, so it means that we can be attacked at any minute, at any day, basically. We already trying to rebuild what we can, using our own resources, and we we have received some offers of help from, for example, from Poland. They are offering to provide us with the ambulances, which we've lost, all of them. So we are already trying to rebuild what we can. We've restored one floor of the destroyed hospital so that they continue to provide medical services. And I asked of chief pediatrician and I said, how many staff do you have? And before war, there was about 400 staff at this hospital. Now is over 350 have returned. Can you imagine how quickly our people are coming back, how strongly they believe in our city, in our country? Can you imagine? Russians actually, they tried to remove everything. From the city building, they removed all computers. Not a single server, not a single computer left behind. Everything was stolen, removed. So we will need. So even today, if whatever help can be offered, it will be appreciated because. We are trying to rebuild, we helping our armed forces, and so that our armed forces are now strengthening their defensive capabilities in and around the city. So, and as the city, we are trying to provide them with any resources that we can provide. Even they need sometimes shovels. They need all kinds of things, from low tech to high tech, and our people are actually offering whatever they have, whatever they can offer. They come to me and say, whatever I can do to help our city, to civil defenses, to our what can be provided to the military. By the way, we are very well aware of the Canadian technology, how to quickly build housing, different like modular houses that could be put up very quickly. That would be something probably that will be very useful for Ukraine right now, because I am certain that most, if not all, Ukrainians will be coming back.
Conclude. Thank you. Now we go into the second round of questions, given that we are considerably behind. If I could ask the members to keep it restricted to one question and under 3 minutes. First, we go to Ms. Vandenbelt.
Thank you. I hadn't anticipated a second question, but I'm very pleased to have one. I would like to actually put a similar question to what I did before, but particularly to Ms. Musaiva, because you are a journalist, and obviously there is a certain form of documentation that journalists do, but that doesn't always hold up in court. And if there's more that Canada can do to be able to provide assistance, to be able to ensure that any documentation right now will hold up in the International Criminal Court or any future tribunal.
Thank you. Great question. I know that we have started already official investigation, but I think that we don't have enough war crime prosecutors in our country. And I think that it is how actually Canada can help Ukraine during this situation, because I know that investigation has started, but our prosecutors face was like you can imagine, like thousands of victims only in Kyiv region, and you need to investigate like every single case. You need to find all evidences. You need to gather all these evidences, and I met with some international humanitarian law specialists already and international humanitarian law lawyers in Ukraine who work already in Ukraine, and they told me that I've never seen something like that. So, and they have never seen such human rights violations how it was in Ukraine and even in Kyiv region. So I spoke, for example, last week with one of human lawyer, international humanitarian lawyer, and he told me that probably he will try to gather evidences for maybe 50 victims, but we have thousands of victims. I think that we need a cooperation with General Prosecutor Office, and I think it's a cooperation not only for investigation such crimes, but for education as well. So we need to educate prosecutors how to investigate such cases, and because I think that we have a problem with this. And I know that a lot of civil organizations already gather such evidences. One of them is coalition's name 5 a.m. And this is coalition of 37 human rights organizations in Ukraine, and I think that I will suggest to work both. I will suggest to work with our government, and I will suggest to work with such coalition of human rights organizations. Her name is 5 a.m. So I can provide you context, but it's not hard to find. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for Ms. Kravchuk to answer briefly? Go ahead.
Ms. Vandenbeld? I'm afraid not. So we're keeping it limited to 3 minutes. My apologies. So the next round goes to Mr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your very, frankly, disturbing testimony in terms of what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. It had been submitted that sanctions are working, but they are having an impact, and in that regard, perhaps Ms. Kravchuk is in the best position to comment as a member of Parliament. Does she have any recommendations on how those sanctions can be improved upon in terms of better coordination between the U.S., Canada, the U.K., and other countries? Does she have anything to add in terms of how we can strengthen and make those sanctions more effective?
Yes, I surely can answer to that. Sanctions are harmful to Russia, but not harmful enough for Putin to stop the war. He clearly gets a lot of money from gas and oil. And in that regard, I'm really thankful for Canada being a first G7 country completely banning oil. But right now we're still waiting for the sixth package of sanctions from European Union, and it's been negotiating probably right now till the very end. And in this package, we'll probably see the ban on oil, but we'll not see the ban on gas. And gas gets a lot of money to Russia. We counted that Russia gets around 800 million euro per day of money selling energy resources. That's at least, probably the same amount they spent for a war in Ukraine every day. So they get this money all the time. Another thing that has to be strengthened is sanctions on banks. Gazprom Bank is the bank which is operating all these transactions with energy resources, and it's not under sanctions. It's not off SWIFT yet. We hope that Sberbank, another big system bank, will be in this sanction list. So, total embargo on energy resources would do the thing. We understand it's a long time, and probably the help of United States, Canada could be provided to countries to find other, sources of getting the energy. And another thing which Canada could be, I think, very helpful, and you as members of Foreign Affairs Committee could work on that, is trying to influence India. India is trying to stay neutral, to buy oil, to have business as usual with Russia. It's not a time to be neutral. Please talk to Indian parliamentarians. We're ready to have sort of 3 countries meeting between Ukrainian Parliament, Indian Parliament, and Canadian Parliament. Please help us negotiate in that. Thanks.
Thank you. The next round goes to Mr. Trudel.
Merci, Jaren.
Thank you. I have a quick question for Ms. Musieva. We know that when there is a war, media outlets are targeted, as are journalists, newspapers, television stations. There was an attack against the TV station in Kiev near the town of Papia. I think that you referred to that in a newspaper article, that it affected you deeply. Could you please elaborate on that, Ms. Musieva?
Yes, actually, I'm one of the member of civil board of Babin Yar project, so that's why, of course, I think that when it happened in the beginning of March, it's a tragedy, and it's tragedy that we are going through second time. You know that Babin Yar was the biggest massive grave of killed Jewish in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. So more than 100,000 people were killed and in this place. And now when you face with this in 21st century, of course it is difficult, and I know from my Jewish friends, and I know from Jewish representative of Jewish organizations in Ukraine, that they were shocked by this. And unfortunately, 2 days ago, for example, Jewish cemetery in Gluchiv also was bombed. And I also know that the memorial of for Jewish people was bombed also in Kharkiv in April. So we have already 3 examples how it happened, and I think that after all quotes of Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov, what he said about Israel government, that they helped for kind of neo-Nazis, and you know that Putin even asked about. Asked Bennett about kind of forgive that. So it's quite for me emotional situation, and absolutely shocked in 21st century after what we went through in 20th century. So.
Merci.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Now the last round goes to Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to our witnesses for the testimony today. I think I'll end today, if I could, with Ms. Kravchuk and Ms. Musieva. I'm sure I've pronounced that incorrectly. I apologize. What I'm very interested in is justice for women as we go through these horrible times in Ukraine. If you could both speak a little bit very quickly about the violence against women, the gender-based violence we're seeing in Ukraine, and how Canada can support women being part of the peace process and having justice, receiving justice at the end of this conflict. Perhaps I could start with you, Ms. Kravchuk.
Yes. Thank you. It really resonates my heart because my resolution in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe is about women in conflict and peace reconciliation. So it will be on vote in June. So I could just draw from the conclusions of my resolution report. First of all, as I said before, we need help of psychologists that dealt with sexual violence during conflict, because the number of these cases are under recorded. It's not, it's just a tip of the iceberg, what we get, because women are afraid to speak. Also, another thing that could be help that we could use from Canada is helping NGOs who are working in this field. We have probably as you as well, the national action plans for the resolution 1325 for the United Nations resolution, and there is a list of NGOs who are working with government on this, on the national action plan, and they are run by women. And actually, yesterday I was participating in this discussion organized by Georgetown University in Washington, based in Washington, and we had a very powerful speeches of women from NGOs who are working on the ground, who are staying in the cities, helping their peers to overcome. And of course, also it's documenting, and that's another thing that our prosecutor attorney general office could receive. And also we have the police is working as well on collecting this evidence and testimonies to put actually these cases to the international tribunal as well, because these are clear war crimes that were committed. But also we need to understand that not only women and girls were raped, but men as well and boys. So it's it's covered all ages, all genders, and it's really horrific, these cases, and those who committed it should be put into tribunal.
Yeah, I want to continue about raped women. 2 weeks ago, one of hospital in Kiev asked me for help with providing pill abortion, actually for women who were raped, because it was a problem even with this, because that Evgeny already described that it's very traumatized situation, and women are afraid to ask about that, and they can only ask for that in hospitals, in this kind of physicians. So and physicians asked me as a journalist just to help with this, with providing. So I think that it's about medical assistance and about psychological assistance. So the main issues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McPherson. This concludes this session. Allow me, on behalf of the entire committee, to thank you all. What we heard, obviously, was incredibly compelling, but also disturbing, if not unconscionable. So please rest assured that the resolve, the courage, the determination that you have demonstrated in the last 2 months has won you a big place in all our hearts. And we will continue to stand with you, and we're hoping for a very early victory. Thank you very much for appearing before our committee. Take good care.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
now that our guests have left, would it be possible for me to move my motion now?
Absolutely. Of course, Ms. McPherson.
Thank you. Well, and I think it's been distributed, so everyone should have it in both official languages. So, Mr. Trudel, my apologies, I won't read it in French because, of course, that would probably not sound as good as you'd like.
Sorry, Ms. McPherson, one second. Are we not supposed to go in camera?
I would rather do this not in camera. I'll just read it into the record, and then hopefully we have consensus on it. It is that pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the subcommittee undertake a study on global reproductive rights and justice, including the situation of reproductive rights and justice in the United States of America, and that the committee holds 2 meetings on this issue, and that committee report its findings and recommendations to the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Mr. Chair, we had a discussion at the beginning of this committee where we talked about pressing issues and making sure that there was time and space available for pressing issues. This is a very pressing issue that I think this subcommittee has an obligation to study. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Would anyone like to speak to this? Yes, Ms. Vandenbelt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And in the interest of time, I just want to say that I wholeheartedly support Ms. McPherson's motion, and I'm very pleased that she's brought it forward. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Viersen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that this committee is supposed to operate on consensus, and I will just state that there will be no consensus on this particular issue. I think that the human rights, International Human Rights Committee that we are, ought to be investigating actual human rights abuses around the world. The human rights of the preborn children around the world are important as well, and I'd happily pursue a study on that. I would just say that at this time, this is given the situation in the United States and the leaks that have happened down there, I would say that we should be monitoring it, but I don't think that Canada needs to be commenting in any way at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Trudeau.
Mr. Chairperson, I think it's a very good motion. The only problem is we don't have much time. It'll be the summer soon. We have a couple of weeks left. We already have a busy schedule. And we've got the Tigre, which is an important major conflict, unlike Ukraine, which we don't hear about it very much, and yet it's very serious. So I think it's important that we focus on it too. Now, this is an important issue, the whole issue of abortion, and of course, it's getting a lot of media coverage at the moment for obvious reasons, both domestically and abroad, and yet Tigray is not getting much coverage, and Haiti, well, is almost barely spoken about at all nowadays. We don't have much time. If we had 3 more weeks ahead of us, I'd say yes, but I don't think it fits in with the current schedule that we have.
Yes, Ms. McPherson.
Perhaps the clerk could give us a bit of a scan of what we do still have left on our agenda. I think that this is quite a pressing issue. Certainly, if we are looking at the reduction of rights of women that are impacted around the world, we have seen the impact of the removal of reproductive health rights for people around the world. It has caused numerous examples of death, and lack of access to those services may have implications for Canadians and for providing of services in Canada. So there is some implication for us. There is clear proof that the restriction of reproductive health for women causes death and great harm. So it is something that is, I think Mr. Trudel said, was very, very urgent. I of course would never want to rank any of the crises that our committee has to look at as above another, but this does impact 50% of the population of the world. So perhaps the clerk could give us a bit of a sense of what our schedule is and refresh my memory.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have all of our meetings filled at this point up until June 21st. It includes our recognition of international human rights champions, Tigray, Haiti, consideration of our draft report, which will be upcoming, and human rights in Iran.
Okay. I understand, Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I personally, like most members of this committee, support the motion and do think that this is an important topic, a very topical conversation that we should be having. I'm mindful that this committee is also a consensus-based committee, and that's an important aspect of how we function. So I'm hoping that we can come to consensus on this issue, and I'd like to see us move towards that if possible. But again, I strongly support the motion.
Ms. McPherson, was your hand up or down, or?
It was up again. I'll be very quick. Well, what I would say is I recognize that in the past this committee has gone by consensus. I think we've seen some examples where that has not necessarily been the way that this committee has worked this time around, unfortunately, to my deep sadness. Perhaps the solution is that we could keep this study on the record for potential to look at it in the fall, if that's possible.
Yes, absolutely. I think we can keep it on the.
There's no consensus. So.
There's no consensus to keep it there? Or?
look, I think we've got a number of pressing issues, and I'm certainly not going to give my support to this study.
But do we, because we haven't taken a vote, automatically it does stay, does it not? This is just a matter of procedure, that if something is not disposed of, it remains in the pipeline, so to speak. Yeah?
May I?
Yes.
And in fairness, I just to clarify, we have at this point a hypothetical Supreme Court decision in the United States. So I guess in that respect, if it stands until the fall for further consideration based upon what we see unfold. Yes,
Mr. Zubair.
I would say that, I mean, what Heather, our colleague at this committee, is suggesting is that it remain on the table for conversation after the summer, at which point, if there's consensus, there's consensus. If there isn't, there isn't. But at least it remains on the table for conversation, and we can broach this issue at that point in time. So that allows us to continue with our agenda that we've decided thus far and approach this issue after the summer.
Okay. So, so I guess we can now move to the next item on the agenda. And if we could go in camera right now. Suspend.